Okay, for today I need to teach you something called recursive sequences. And this is a notation that is required by both the MCA tests, thank you, which are like tests you have to pass in Minnesota. Technically, if you don't pass, there's really not that much that happens, but you're supposed to pass them. At least you'll know that you're failing the math requirement or whatever. And they're also on this big test called the ACT that a lot of you have heard about. All right, so that's why this is important, is this isn't just something that I dreamed up. This is math that is required both by the state and by the ACT, so you probably ought to know it. And it's a fancy way of writing a sequence. Let me show you just how kind of confusing and crazy this is. Do not even write this down. Can anybody tell me what that means? It says u sub 0 is 28. U sub n is equal to u sub n minus 1 plus 7. Think you got it? Oh, don't say it yet. One person thinks they know what this means. All right, give it a shot. So you start with 28. That's a good guess, but you're off a little bit. She said subtract 1 from the number and then add 7. That's a good guess, but that's not it. Yes?
You have 28 equal to 27 plus 7.
So you think the next one is 27 plus 7? Nope, you're close, but you're not right. All right, so two kids gave it a shot. I think you can see, man, this stuff looks complicated. Okay, now set that aside for a minute, and I'm going to slowly walk you up to this. We'll come back to it later, and you'll be like, oh, that's easy. Okay, so it's kind of cool. You're going to learn something, you can tell. You're going to learn what that is. That's called recursive notation. All right, so I'm going to slowly walk you up to that now. So right now, you can write this one down. 20, comma, 25, comma, 30, comma, dot, dot, dot. Do you get I'm implying that we should keep adding something and then you just keep going forever with this thing? All right, do you get the next number after 30 would have been 35? This is really easy, Mr. Servant. That's the same thing we were just doing. But you didn't recognize it. Why? Because of the notation. All right, so I'll show you one little step at a time how this stuff works. All right, first of all, these are all u's. The easiest way to say it is if I start with the first one, I'm going to call it u sub 1. This is going to be called u sub 2. This is going to be called u sub 3. Why u? Actually, it doesn't have to be a u. It could be an a. I've seen this where some books label it a sub 1, a sub 2, and a sub 3. And I kind of like a better in a way because a kind of goes with amount. So it's like amount 1, amount 2, and amount 3. Do you get what I'm doing there? All right. But we're going to use u's because why? Just that's how our book is written. I actually have seen the a's just about as often as I've seen the u's, though. So on a test, look on like the ACT or whatever, don't let it freak you out if they use an a instead of a u. All right, so when I say u sub 1 equals 20, do you get that just means that the first term is 20? Then comes that other part. U sub n is equal to u sub n minus 1. Let me explain that part by doing this. I arbitrarily chose to start with 1. I didn't have to call that u sub 1. I could have started with u sub anything I want. Typically, you start with 1, or do you get that u sub 0 could make sense in this context? At year 0, when we started our experiment, there were 20 mice. And then after u sub 1, which would be after 1 year, there were 25 mice. Do you get the idea here? After 2 years, there were 30 mice. Do you get why you might start with u sub 0? If you wanted to say it like times 0. I'll give you one more example. Where is my pen right now? Would you agree it's like, I don't know, 5 feet off the floor or so? So if I'm doing an experiment and I'm graphing it, do you get, I would say, at time 0, when you started this, it was at 5 feet. Do you get how time 0 makes sense in that context? Because I haven't started yet. And then if I drop it, which I just realized I don't really want to drop this pen because it could break. But if I did, then after like a quarter of a second, it would be down to like 1. And then maybe at, I don't know, half a second, it would have bounced off the floor and it would be sitting on the floor after 1 second. My point is, time at 0 is a good thing to use to start sometimes. All right, then last and weirdest is you can call it u sub n. Well, which one's n? Any one I want. So n is a variable, right? Don't you use a variable when you don't know what the number is? So if I said this, I want to call this spot u sub n. I could pick any one I want and call it u sub n. Then what's the one in front of it? U sub n minus 1. What's the one after it? U sub n plus 1. Now, we pretty much never use u sub n plus 1, but it just follows the same way as, like, if this is u sub n, and this is 1 less than that, and this would have to be 1 more than that, right? Okay, so when you see these two, what you need to process is, this is the any term. U sub n means any term. Any term you want. You can pick any one you want, and you call it u sub n. What would the one in front of it be? U sub n minus 1. The one in front of that one. So, anybody understand why I'm going to say u sub 1 is equal to 20? Are you speaking this language now? Do you get what I just wrote there? U sub 1 equals 20. That's saying your first term is 20. What do I mean when I say this then? U sub n is equal to u sub n minus 1 plus 5. That means any term, remember that's any term. Any term is given by, what's this one again? What does that mean again? The term in front of it. Any term is given by the term in front, add 5. That's what's happening in this little sequence. Yes?
Could you then go u sub n equals u sub n plus 1 minus 5?
You actually could. But we aren't ever going to write it that way. But what you said was right. All right, I'm going to give you one more example, and let's see if you've got this. Now, this is just the basics. But yet, we're almost up to an R3 level question on a test. And we've only been talking about this for, well, my video says 8 minutes. Okay, so if you're feeling like, oh my gosh, this is going so fast, it's because I got to get you ready to do your homework for tonight, and yet you don't have to have mastered this until the test. Maybe you've already got it. If I said u sub 1 is equal to 12, and u sub n is equal to the term in front of it plus 3, would you be able to write the first 3 terms? I bet you could. Give it a shot. Write the first 3 terms of this. All right, and in a moment, what I'm going to do is have you compare with the kid across from you, and I want you to get to know them a little bit. And some of you look to the wrong way. There's obviously a kid across from you on your left and on your right. But I'm going to pause for a second to pair you with somebody, and this is going to be the person you're going to pair with the most. And then I want you to get to know them a little bit, so I want to make you introduce yourself. Pausing. So here's a common mistake. Kids will say it's 9, and then 12, and then 15. I get that you could make up a number before 12, but you're supposed to start with 12. It's the given first term. And some of you are like, but isn't u sub 0 there? Nope. Because I defined my first term by listing this, u sub 1 is the first term. Period. I said so because I get to pick what the first term is by writing that. All right, so the first term was 12, and then it's a 15, and then after that it's 18. Raise your hand if you had 12, 15, and 18. Awesome. And a lot of people had 9, 12, and 15, and I get it, but it's wrong. All right. quick note on cell phones. I know I haven't said anything. That's why I'm not going to be mad about it. But if you have cell phones out, if you could put them away at this point. I know you're not like texting away or I would have said something. But don't have them out until last 10 minutes. Then you can bust them right out. Even if I'm still, kind of wrapping up. If it's 10 minutes from the end of the hour, I will never take your cell phone away for having it out in the last 10 minutes. So you can have a little bit of time with your phone. You just can't have until last 10 minutes. All right, so back to this. If I had said times 3, do you get this would have just been a little different? You would have times 12 by 3 and then times it again by 3. That's pretty easy difference there. Okay, so the ones where you're adding have a name. If you add, it's arithmetic. And I totally get this is spelled like arithmetic, but you say it arithmetic. If it's adding or subtracting, because technically they're getting on a technicality here, you're just adding a negative number. It's still adding. Anyway, adding ones are arithmetic. Anyone want to take a guess what to multiply? And hence, oh, by the way, you can't divide. Well, you can multiply by a decimal, which is like dividing. What do you think the multiply ones are? Yes? That's an excellent guess, and there is an exponential tie to this thing. So you're right, but you're at a different level than we're at right now. We don't call them exponentials until next chapter. Yes?
Geometric.
That's it, geometric. So there's arithmetic and geometric. And do you get if you multiply by like a decimal, you're really just dividing? If you multiply by 0.5, you're just dividing it by 2. Okay, so you get that you can divide, but it's not officially called divide. You're just multiplying by a decimal. All right, so now I have to up this whole game and say, what if I said u sub 0? What, now you're going to start with 0? Yep, I get to start with whatever I want. U sub 0 is 3, and u sub n is equal to u sub n minus 1 times 2. What are the first 3 terms? And is it geo or arith? And the first 3 terms. I'm going to pause for a second while you try to answer those 2 questions. Arithmetic or geometric, and the first 3 terms. So did you say 3? That's a safe bet. It was given as the first term. And then I times by 2 makes 6, and then I times by 2 makes 12. 3, 6, 12. Raise your hand if you had that one right. Awesome. Was it arithmetic or geometric? Geometric. And then the last word I haven't taught you is, there's a name for this thing we multiply by each time. If you add something each time, it's called a common difference. Do you get if it's the difference between this term and the next term? It's called a common difference. But if you're multiplying by something, it's called the common... Can anybody name that tune? Common what? Yes? Close. Common ratio. And I like the word factor. A factor means you multiply by something. I like that. But here's how this works. If I want to figure out the common ratio, I take this divided by that. Get how 6 divided by 3 makes the 2? How do I do that again? Second term divided by the first term. That's why it's a ratio. It's the ratio of 6 to 3, which is 2. All right, so here's a weird question for you. A series goes 20 and then 25. Wouldn't you kind of assume it added 5? But couldn't it have been multiplied by like 1.2? Yeah, you never can tell until you see the third number. So if I see the third number and it's 30, then I'm locked in. I know it's just adding 5. But if I realize, oh, they're actually multiplying by, would 1.2 actually do it? No. What would do it? There's a reason. There's a method to my madness. You have a question like this in your homework. What are they multiplying by? I just told you 2 seconds ago how to do this. It's a common what again? Ratio. So 25 divided by 20. That's how you get that decimal. So my nifty calculator here. 25 divided by 20. 1.25. That was the common ratio. Okay? You divide the second term divided by the first term. So that's the last thing I needed to tell you. Common ratio. Let's see if you can handle it even when it gets weird. 30 goes to 36.1. You might think, oh, you added 6.1. Nope. I multiplied by something. What did I multiply by? Don't say it. Write it. How could I say I multiplied by something? I could say it was geometric. That's effectively saying, hey, I multiplied by something. How many of you knew enough to say 36.1 divided by 30 is your answer? Excellent. That's it. That makes sense? Okay. Tomorrow we're going to get hardcore into calculator use. So I would strongly recommend bringing one of these TI-83, TI-84, that kind of calculator with you tomorrow. Little known fact, if you don't have one of these calculators and your family cannot afford one of these calculators, just go down and talk to your counselor and they can probably hook you up with one where you wouldn't even have to pay for it. Okay, there's this thing called Minnetonka Family Friends, which is a basically a charitable organization. We're going to be raising money for them during Heart Week that's coming up here soon. The money, all the money we make goes to them. And they do things like that with it. Or some kid goes, I can't afford to take the ACT. I want to go to college, but I can't afford that stupid test. Can you help me? They say, sure. They write the check, done. It's a charity. I contribute to it, and anybody who helps out in Heart Week, you'll be contributing to it. Anyway, if you need a calculator, ask your counselor, they can hook you up. But I know most of you, it's like, my parents couldn't buy me the calculator. I just haven't told them I need one. Well, tell them you need one, because you do. It's really, really, really handy. Can you survive without it? Yes. I have a few I can lend you. I keep like 2 in my backpack, maybe 3. But if you're going to want to borrow that every day, I'm going to beseech you, please talk to somebody, get one. You can even talk to me. I've had kids tell me, like on the side, hey, Mr. Server, my family right now, my dad just lost his job. We can't really afford the calculator. And I've just said, here, use it for the semester. It's no problem. Okay, so if you need one, let me know and I'll get you one. Or talk to your counselor if you don't want me to know. All right, but please have a calculator. And I totally forget. You're going to be spacey. Sometimes you'll forget it. Just don't be spacey every day. All right. So I'm going to teach you the nitty gritty of complicated putting this into the calculator tomorrow. But for today, you just use the calculator to, like, let's say I wanted the next term. I wouldn't want to do that. I'd have to take this times that. That's kind of gross. Know what I mean? First of all, even getting that's kind of gross. I'd like a calculator for that. So you'll want to use a calculator. All right. So your homework for tonight is a Schoology quiz. And we're already there. You've made it to homework for tonight. Sweet. So let's open that Schoology quiz together. And I'm being real here. I can't put it up on the screen, but I can if somebody tells me what the first problem says. There's one of those little puzzle piece looking things. It's a Schoology quiz. I allow 2 tries. And after the first one, you get to see the answers. Do you get the second one ought to go pretty well because you've already seen all the answers? So why would you want to do it the second time? Well, because if your first score is like a 7 out of 12, that's not a great grade. You might want to go do it again once you've had a chance to see the answer and practice that, and then your score average will be higher. Can I just have the higher score? No. Here's the problem with that. Some kids will just type in crap answers, crap, hit enter, so they can see all the answers, and then they can have a perfect paper. That's not really a perfect paper then. That's just you copying the answers. So I want you to try on your first one. I've already taught you how to do it. You should be able to do it. But then the second try, obviously, you'll get a high score because you've already seen all the answers. So you don't have to always take it twice. In fact, if I had a decent score on it the first time, I'd just be done. But if my score was kind of embarrassing and pretty hideous, I'd probably take it again so I can get the average. All right. So, first question. Have you found it yet? Would you read me the first question, sir, in the front row?
U of 1 equals 20, and then U of n equals U of n minus 1 plus 6, and then n is greater than or equal to 2.
All right, let's talk about that n is greater than or equal to 2 part. You're going to see that there. For now, you can just ignore it. It doesn't do anything other than tell the mathematician that this formula only works for the second term on. Why? Because this formula predicts the future. Can it predict what happened before the 20? No, we talked about that in class. You can't know what happened before right now, except if you were there. Okay, well, this 20 was the first term. We don't know what happened before that, but it started at 20, and then what's the next term? 26, what's the next term? 32, and then how many terms do they want? First 4. The common mistake here is to start with the wrong one. 20 is the first term. Include it. A lot of people start with 26. I get it. You're thinking, well, I already gave me the 20, but that's the first term, so put it in your list. That's the first term, that's the second term, that's the third term, that's the fourth term. All right, and is this one arithmetic or geometric? You're adding arithmetic. So all you got to do in the question is A or G, right? So it's A. And then first four terms, that's these. Hanging with us so far? All right. We'll go a few more in because it gets a little more complicated. In the back row. Yes, you, Jay. I'm trying not to say the names on the videos. Tell me the second question.
So it's write the first four terms of each sequence and then determine if formula is arithmetic or geometric. And it's u sub 0 is 32.
Can I start with a 0? Yes, you can. The first term is now 32 because it's been defined that way by the writer of the sequence. 32 is first. So remember, when you're writing your first four terms, include the 32. Okay, keep going.
Formula u sub n equals 1.5 times u sub n minus 1.
Do you notice a subtle difference there? They switched the u sub n minus 1 to second. Do you get if you multiply by something, it doesn't matter if it's 3 times 5 or 5 times 3, you can reverse them. That's called the commutative property. You can do that, so they did that, and they multiplied in front instead of multiplying afterwards. It's fine. It's the same thing. Do you get where a calculator would be handy right now? If you had a calculator, let me be your calculator. You take 32 for your first term, right? And we put in 32, and then you do what? What do you want me to type? 32, what? Times, what? 1.5. And you get 48. What do you want me to do now? Times 1.5. And you get 72. Do I need to do it again? So far we got 32, 48, and 72. Should I do it again? Times 1.5. 108. There's your first four terms. 32, 48, 72, 108. And was this arithmetic or geometric? Geometric, because it was a multiply. All right. I want to do 1, 2, skip a few, because a lot of people get stuck on problem 5. Could you skip ahead to problem 5? I think it lets you do that, doesn't it? As long as you don't hit submit. Okay, go look at problem 5. It's a little more weird. GM. Did you read this one to me? Hold on. What data they actually give you? Remember me talking about this one? What do you do to find that number they're multiplying by each time? And how do I know they're even multiplying? Because it says geometric. And then how do I find that number they're multiplying by? What do I do again? What do I divide? 36.8. I'm being your calculator for you. Divided by what? 40. Notice it's got to be this one divided by that one. The second one divided by the first one. If you go backwards, your answers are all be backwards. All right, and that comes out to 0.92. That means when they multiplied from here to here, it was times 0.92. That means it's shrinking by 8%, by the way. You'll learn more about that later. But you times by 0.92, it's going to get smaller because you're multiplying by a decimal. All right, so yay, I have found the common ratio right there. And now I could write one of those formulas. So this also is something I didn't talk about much. your iPad can't do subscripts, so you have to put it in parentheses. So let me show you. U sub 0 equals 40. Why U sub 0? Because they said to start with 0. Then U sub n, U parentheses n minus 1. That's how you do subscripts, with parentheses. And then last but not least, I'm timesing by, what was that decimal again? 0.92. That's the formula. But what about this, Mr. Server? Not required on the iPad. But if you want to know how I get that, it's always just one bigger than whatever you started with. Because the idea is this formula can't figure out the first term for you. It can't figure out the 0 term. It can figure out the 1 term or the 2 term or the 3 term, but it can't figure out the very first one. It's kind of like us, human beings, struggling to try to figure out what happened before all of this was here. So, now we're started. My daddy used to always say, if you're started, you're halfway done. So, this, because I knew it would be a little stressful on the very first day to have a difficult assignment and have it due like right away, I actually made it due by midnight tomorrow. Normal assignments are going to be due at midnight from now on, but normally you're only going to have that same day at midnight. So in other words, normally I should have said midnight tonight is due. But because it's the first day of school and we had a lot of stuff to do, like get to know you a little bit, get to know the person across from you a little bit, and I want to do a math behind it, and I want to give you the seating chart, whew, that's too much for one day. So I decided I'll just take a little pressure off the homework. It's not due tomorrow until midnight tomorrow night. All right. Some of you will finish early. I know you will. And that's all I have for you for today.